A former Hebrew Israelite renounces his position within the Hebrew Israelite.
This stuff is so comical, y'all. I mean, like, now they're pulling people off the street, and paying them to say, hey, I used to be a Hebrew Israelite, you know, and and I had to get out of there because they're a cult, and you know, they teach me how to read the Bible, and they telling me to, keep the commandments of God, and they telling me I have to stop fornicating and marry my women, so I had to get out of there. It's a cult. You know what else they told me? Inside this cult, they told me I had to keep the Sabbath days holy, and I can't eat pork fried rice no more. I just had to leave. You see, it's not really funny because, you have people in the Roman Catholic Church, priests, that, do weird things to young men, in the Catholic Church. And what they do is they hide it, they sweep it under the rug, and they move the priest to a different district, or whatever they call it, a different congregation. And nothing is ever done to these priests in the Roman Catholic Church. You have people in the pulpit who are, being caught sleeping with young men, pastors who are being caught, you know, parking their cars in a abandoned parking lot somewhere with little, you know, 13, 14-year-old boys, you see. But they choose to make, you know, videos about ex-Hebrew Israelite, exposes their organization, aims to destroy them. You can't make this stuff up. You know, one thing that people, non-melanated people hate most of all is black unity. J. Edgar Hoover himself said, you know, the greatest threat to America is black unity. Anytime you have black people coming together, and uniting as a people, you know, it's a problem. It's a problem for these people. And you always had people like this that look like us, you know, even on the plantation. If black people were congregating, plotting, against their oppressors and coming up with ways to escape, you always had people like this. You see that, they had to run and tell it. They had to run and tell, the slave master, so that he can get brownie points. See, it was Judases like this that plotted, you know, against the Messiah. It was people that was, you know, of melanated people who plotted against Christ. You see, to have him taken out of the way, so that their white oppressors could continue to rule, over them. They're not comfortable, unless their oppressors are in control. They don't ever want to see their own people, rise up. That's fearful to these people. That's very fearful. Now let's go to the book of Luke, chapter 20, and let's start reading at verse 19. Because this isn't nothing's new under the sun. You see, the things that happen aforetime, it happened because for our learning. It's still going to happen again today. You see, they see black people uniting under Christ, under God, keeping his commandments, and it's a problem for them. Verse 19. And the chief priests and the scribes the same hour sought to lay hands on him. They sought to lay hands on the Messiah for what he was teaching because he had many followers. They were uniting. Black people were uniting under Christ. And they feared the people, for they perceived that he had spoken this parable against them. And they watched him and sent forth spies. See, they sent forth spies. They are putting spies in the congregations. Any Israelite congregation, they send forth spies to gather information. Anything negative that they can find and bring back and make videos to discredit the Israelites. They sent forth spies which should feign themselves just men. They're in the congregation. They put fringes on. They got the beard on. They look like they keeping commandments. They seem like they're sincere about being repentant. They feign themselves just men that they might take hold of his words. They wanted to use the Messiah's words against him, that so they might deliver him unto the power and authority of the governor. And they asked him, saying, Master, we know that thou sayest and teachest rightly. See how cunning the devil is, the serpent? You have serpents that look just like us. They're not always white people. They look just like us. Neither acceptest thou the person of any, but teachest the way of God truly. This is the question they ask him. Is it lawful for us to give tribute unto Caesar or no? But he perceived their craftiness. He knew they were spies. He perceived their craftiness and said unto them, Why tempt ye me? Show me a penny, whose image and superscription hath it. They answered and said, Caesar. And he said unto them, Render therefore unto Caesar the things which be Caesar's, and unto God the things which be God's. And they could not take hold of his words before the people. They could not use any kind of negative words or any kind of negative information against the Messiah and the apostles. And they could not take hold of any of his words before the people, and they marveled at his answer and held their peace. So look, moral of the story, y'all. We have people, that look like us. You know, they work for Satan. These Uncle Toms, these Kevins, on the plantation. They work for Satan. So don't let them turn you away from the truth. You see, don't let them take your light. Shalom.